The monster is not about money. So for all of people with great intentions who tell you to change your money story, change your life, which by the way is great marketing, I just have never seen it to work because it's not really about money. We've just made money up. But what money represents, love, value, safety, power, is real and important.
This is A Joyful Rebellion, the podcast that explores that moment you realize the life and success you worked so hard to create didn't come with all the fulfillment you thought it would. I'm your host, James Walters, and I want you to be the author of your own story. Each week, I connect with people who inspire bold answers to the question, what do I do now to create a life I love? If you're ready to start answering that question for yourself, you're in the right place. So let's start a joyful rebellion. A lot of us try to fix our money problems with spreadsheets, strategies, or self-help mantras. But what if the real block isn't financial, it's emotional? And what if healing your relationship with money starts by giving it a face and a personality? Morgana Rae is a best-selling author, speaker, and coach who created the Financial Alchemy method, a process that's helped countless people slay their money monster and replace it with a loving, empowering relationship. She's also someone who knows a thing or two about love in real life, having married the same man 29 times in 29 different countries. In this conversation, we explore how deep emotional wounds, childhood messages, and even trauma can form our subconscious money beliefs. Morgana walks us through her 6-step process of transforming your relationship with money, not through spreadsheets or sales scripts, but through story, visualization, and radical self-honesty. Get ready for an episode that's as mystical as it is practical, because when love and money stop fighting, your whole life can change. Morgana Rae, thank you so much for being here on A Joyful Rebellion today.
Nothing more joyful or rebellious.
You are a good person to talk about relationships, but not any kind of relationships. We're going to talk about one specific relationship that everyone has. So we're not talking about family. We're not talking about significant other, but I do kind of want to start off with a significant other question that pertains to you, because I saw you've been married 29 times, and I should probably, for people whose eyebrows are up in their hat at this point, or maybe in the ceiling, I should follow that up with you've been married 29 times in 29 countries to the same guy.
I got a late start.
Okay.
I have been looking for my Prince Charming because I was totally indoctrinated by Disney films from a very young age. So I was looking for my guy before I chased Brian Patterson under the piano at his 5th birthday party. And Brian was the older man. And I did not meet my husband until I was 45. And he came up with the idea that we get married 100 times in 100 countries. But this was, by the way, not on the first date.
Yeah. Okay, smooth.
On the second date, in fact, he told me that he didn't believe in marriage. And something changed over the next year and a half. And he proposed to me while I was in Bali leading my retreat. And he was in South Africa taking photographs of beautiful animals, and he Skyped me because back in the olden days, before everybody was using Zoom, we had this thing called Skype. And he proposed marriage over Skype while we were nowhere to be found. And we eloped. And a couple weeks later, he had a writing assignment. He was a travel journalist, and he had an assignment in Mexico. And he said, hey, I just got married. And they said, bring your wife along, make it a honeymoon. And so we were in Puerto Vallarta, and we were walking by their iconic cathedral, Our Lady of Guadalupe. And he said, hey, you want to get married again?
Yeah.
And we were filthy and greasy, and, you know, we had massages, so we still had all the oil and all the dust. And I said, of course. We went into the cathedral and exchanged vows for the second time, and it just went so much deeper. And that's when he got the idea, we should keep doing this. So this was 100% his idea. And the reason I'm kind of sharing so much about it is I got a very, very late start. I didn't get married for the first time until I was 47 years old. And a couple of things. I think midlife love is better because we're slightly less idiotic than when we were speaking for myself. And
Maybe.
we aren't trying to change the person we're with, because by the time you're in your late 40s, it's like the person is cooked. This is what you get. So there's not all that dating potential that we women tend to do. And it actually ties into what you brought me on to talk about relationship with money, because 9 years after I slayed my money monster and created this new love-based relationship with money, as if it were a person, and I'll go deeper into that, I was teaching on stages all over the planet, from Australia to Oslo, Norway, and everything in between, and saying a lot of the same things. It's actually evolved a lot since then, but there's some basic core principles. And I'm hearing myself talk about money, and that annoying voice in the back of your head, you know, the one I'm talking about, is saying, whispering to me at the time, this is 2012, that sounds like love. That sounds like all of your romantic failures. What I'm saying about the money monster, that's sounding like a love monster. Maybe you should slay a love monster. And I'm like, oh no, be quiet, be quiet. I don't want to do that. And then I finally did in June of 2012. And I met my husband 2 months later on August 12th, 2012. So it works in multiple, what I'm going to teach, a process that I call alchemy, when technically registered trademark financial alchemy, but it works also for these other pain areas of life where you're just pursuing and you're doing all the right stuff and you're reading the books and you're taking the actions and you're getting nowhere.
Yeah.
I am talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you are, because that's the whole thing this entire podcast is about. It's about, you did all the right stuff, but you still got that little voice nagging you saying, yeah, it's probably something else. Can I share a crazy story with you based on the information you just relayed? In a former life, I was a wedding photographer. And one weekend, I found myself getting ready to photograph a wedding in the exact cathedral that you're talking about in Puerto Vallarta. And in 2013, I wrote a book about all the wildest stuff I'd ever seen at weddings, because people would just keep asking me. They'd say, oh, what's the craziest thing? So I wrote this story called Circle of Life. And it all takes place right there at that cathedral. This was in 2006. So a little before when you were there, but we were there. We were all there from the US, the bride and groom. They probably had 24 people who were there. So pretty small for a wedding with guests. When we arrived at the cathedral, they said, well, there's a baptism, there's a christening going on. You need to wait in the courtyard, which was cool. It was beautiful. Everything was beautiful all around. I was there with my camera. We were taking pictures like crazy. No one felt like they were waiting for anything. But we wait for the baptism to finish up. Then we could all get inside. And really, the family took up just the first row and a half, maybe. And no one spoke Spanish in this whole group. I didn't understand Spanish. So the priest is up there doing his thing. And it's kind of like a game of charades, because he would motion, okay, now you exchange rings, or now you say yes, and all of this. So it was a little comical, but because there weren't any guests in the pews behind the first two, I was up really close. And when they got married, they turned around and they did the fist pump and whatever, and they walked down the aisle, and I turned around. The whole church was full, and the whole church was full of local people, not tourists. Because before, there were a lot of tourists milling around, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. I guess they came for the show. I don't know. And then at the end, the bride and groom got to the end, and then they kind of turned around. They came back for the family photos that happened up at the altar, right? And I could tell that the priest was kind of looking at his watch a little bit, and this church was still full of people. And I didn't know what that was all about. But I'm doing my thing. I don't have a lot to do because there's not a lot of family. And at some point, the priest said, okay, we need to wrap it up. And I was like, okay, cool. We'll just go out the side door. And as we're walking out the side door, I look behind me down the aisle, and the two main front doors to the cathedral were open, sunlight streaming in, and I could see the silhouette of them. Well, you're clutching like that sweet, but I could see the silhouette of them bringing in the coffin from the car that was right out front. And I was like, oh, okay, that's what they're all waiting for, is for us to get out. So that's why I call it the circle of life. There was a little baby in there before, and then they get married and they tie a knot, and now we are like, this priest is back to back, is very efficient with his scheduling. So we're out of there, and then they're having a whole different function with a whole different kind of energy is happening next behind us. But I thought that was kind of wild how that space gets used, and we have no idea outside of just our little slice that we live
and
of
it's
it.
all love. Huge death in my family this year, which has really just kind of rocked our lives. And grief is love. And how blessed we are when we have somebody in our life who is worth grieving. Because honestly, and we'll be talking about money, but at the root, it's really about love. Like, our relationship with money is a mirror of our experience of, are we loved? Oh, what are our experiences of not being loved and lovable, not being good enough, not being safe? This is honestly what money represents. This is why I, as a life coach, have been focusing on this for decades, because in my experience, the best pain door into what it really means to be human and all of our soft underbelly of human experience. How do we have a better relationship with life?
It's so cool that you talk about relationship with money in similar terms as relationship with life, because that is hard for a lot of people to wrap their brains around. Well, money's this thing over here, or money's something other people have, or money seems to run through my hands so quickly. Is that the same with life? And how is it that you came to this understanding for yourself?
Great question. First of all, top East Coast education, straight A student, National Merit Scholar, even after a traumatic brain injury, coma, car accident, homelessness in high school and all that, and a mountain of testimonials and certifications and celebrity clients and all this going on. And guess what? Behind the scenes, I was living in Los Angeles, struggling to make $100 a month. Try to beat that. Don't. I came to this approach by necessity after failing at everything else, which I was always a good student. I believed, do this, do that, get a good grade, have success. I just believed all the promises, and they did not apply in my life. And it finally came down to money is this abstract concept. And especially if you come from backgrounds where historical family legacy backgrounds of financial conflicts, of fleeing countries, of being targeted because of perceptions of money and all that kind of stuff. And then my own life of really just failing to make money, it felt like life despised me. It felt like I was being rejected. And I was doing all the things. I was taking the classes. In fact, I was taking classes that were teaching me to do what I was already doing. So not only was I not making money, I was spending money to not make money. And I had just finished this class on overcoming sales objections, where, if you don't know, these are classes that teach you the magic words, in air quotes, to say when somebody says, oh, I would love to, but I can't afford it, don't have the time, whatever. And I was such a good student. I took the class, I used the words, and 7 people in a row, I overcame their objections. Yay! And 7 people in a row never showed up for our first call and never paid.
No.
And that was about the time that I just fell off the cliff emotionally. Just that 7th rejection. And I was terrified, honestly, because I had run out of things to do. I was doing all the things and none of it was working, and it felt very personal and very cruel. Like, hey, I know what to do. I have my talent. I know what to do with my life, and I can't make a living at it. And when you don't have money, regardless of your circumstances, it really, really feels. like life doesn't love you, and you're not imagining it. People behave differently. People treat horrible people nicely because they're perceived to have money, and we know examples of that. And how do you live? So it's really an existential crisis. So here I was, having done all the things, all the left brain marketing, sales, all that kind of stuff. And then I live in LA, Los Angeles. So I also have all the woo friends who would wave their hands and blow in my third eye and speak codes and change my money DNA. And it did nothing for me. Nothing changed. And after I fall off this cliff of rejection, where I even remember this was March 2003, and I closed the drapes in my tiny apartment that I couldn't afford, blackout curtains, got on the bed, just started wailing in grief and despair and rage until I was just emptied out. And I had these two thoughts. Maybe money needed to be my next area of spiritual growth, which is a very Southern California native way to think. And I also had a moment of curiosity, which was, what the heck is going on inside of me that I don't know about, that can't be with money, because none of it makes sense. And it was soon after this that I had a call with my coach. And to say that, remember, I'm making $100 a month living in Los Angeles. And that buys you nothing, because you also have to have a car, all these insurances, everything. So obviously I'm living on debt, and I still have a coach, which is insane. And he and I, seriously, we graduated and passed our exam, our coaching exams on the same day. But he owned a house and I'm in this pit. So I'd been working with him for months, doing everything he said. Nothing was changing until this day when I showed up sort of vomiting my despair and rage and resignation. And this is when things changed. He asked me this weird question, who knows where it came from? And it changed my life. He said, if your money was a person, who would your money be? And because in that moment, I was really in such a terrible place and just overwhelmed by hurt and fear and grief and despair and all that stuff. When he asked me that at that moment, I immediately saw in my mind's eye that my money on that day was this big, scary, dirty, violent biker dude who was malicious and dangerous to me and hated me. Really tall with the tattoos, wife beater shirt, bald, long sideburns, like nothing against that or bikers. It was just that one. And I had this moment of imagining that I was at a live event with this dude and keeping my eye on him all the time to create maximum distance. And that was a huge aha moment, because literally I was paying attention to money. I was doing the speaking gigs and I was doing all the things and paying attention and taking the actions to bring money in my life. But every cell of my body, my entire subconscious knew that it was dangerous and was creating distance. So it didn't matter what I was doing consciously. And anybody with a background in neurolinguistic programming or any of those kind of technologies, I've been a master trainer of that for 20 years, knows that all of our beliefs, attitudes, actions, and results come from the subconscious. So we can set positive intentions, we can have positive mindsets, we can have millionaire money mindsets, and it doesn't matter, because that's not where our beliefs, attitudes, our real beliefs and attitudes and actions and results come from. So this is a way, by giving money personhood, that we get the conscious mind and the unconscious in dialogue. So I could actually see what was going on beneath the surface that I never imagined. So it was clear in that moment that if this was this biker dude, if that was my relationship with money, and I could feel that he wanted to destroy me. And it's imaginary, but it's also not, because the stuff that he represented is very, very real. So I knew there was no way that I could have money in my life if it was that guy. And I had to end that relationship. So if you've ever been in a super toxic relationship that you ended, congratulations. Great life skill for this moment. Although in the 20 years since, 22 years, it's, In the decades since, my approach has become increasingly violent because I find it more effective and my clients have much bigger results. I mean, I've had
So you're dropping grenades now. You're
Yeah.
not just wishing them well.
Yeah, and that's a good point. When it really comes down to it, the monster is not about money. So for all of the coaches and people with great intentions who tell you to change your money story, change your life, which by the way is great marketing, I just have never seen it to work because it's not really about money. Money, we've just made money up. But what money represents, love, value, safety, power, is real and important. So you will not find the money in the money story. You'll find it in experiences that made you feel unlovable, unworthy, unsafe, powerless. And that's really big stuff. I mean, seriously, that is the stuff that makes human beings want to not be alive. So it is dangerous. And if you are going to do this process, I want you to have a monster that is worth getting rid of. And I'm jumping ahead to steps and I'll circle back and break it down. But you really want to put everything that you do not want in your life experience, whether it's personal traumas or global events, the things that wake you up at 3 a.m., everything that you do not want in your life experience, you want to put that into the monster and then reject it when you get rid of the monster. And I'll come back to that later. So in my story, before I knew what I was doing, before I reverse engineered it to make it work for other people, and it works so well for other people, I have my client in Idaho who made $1.2 million within a couple of hours after I briefly coached her on the process. And she's not an outlier. I've got a lot of stories like that.
Can we rewind for just a second?
Of course.
And can we rewind to the biker dude? He sounds like that. I forget the actor's name, but the guy who plays a villain in all the 90s movies basically
Maybe
looks
that's why, maybe it's a childhood thing.
Really hardened criminal. Well, that's where I want to go with it. When you started doing the work and understanding that money to you had this persona of something that felt dangerous and something you wanted to distance yourself from, could you trace it back? Because so many of us get our money programming from our parents when we're young and they say, oh, we don't have the money for this. Or they sort of flippantly tell you their back of the napkin philosophy on money without really explaining it in offhand comments sometimes as a kid. What do you think? Money grows on trees? Yeah, all that stuff. So where did you trace your vision of this money character?
It's going to be unique for everybody, but there were a few really big wounds for me. So that first time, I had a couple of inheritances stolen from me by the people who were supposed to be the people who loved and protected me. I had a mother who didn't actually love me, but found me useful to extort money and commit crimes by using me. And I think I've always been very, very sensitive to injustice in the world and people who are living in lack. And I didn't want to be associated with that problem. And my father was a depression baby. So that and the Holocaust looming in the background were also really kind of big, scary money monsters. So there was the guilt and shame of making money because I know people don't have it and I don't want to be part of, systems of oppression. And then there's also feeling rejected. And I made a decision when I was about 12 years old. And it's crazy how you just quietly make these little decisions as a child and you don't realize how deep they go. And I made a decision when I was 12 years old, the first or second time that a major inheritance was stolen, that this was grown-up stuff and I was going to stay out of it and I was just going to love everybody, which is honestly the best choice I could have made at that time. But the pain of it stays. And I used some of the same stuff when I slayed my love monster later, because love and money and those wounds are really, really deeply linked. The good news, though, is if you just slay one, it has holographic effects. Because, again, we're just talking about our relationship with life and what is the pain in this moment that is inviting you to evolve. So this is why, when you mentioned grenades, why in 2003, we just broke up, and I felt this immediate emptiness, which was kind of wild because I suddenly felt like it wasn't there, and I was just surrounded by a vacuum. So it really, really felt gone and final, but I didn't want it to come back. So I had this like, yay, the monster is gone. And oh, heck, I live in Los Angeles and I have no relationship with money at all. And I need to. And if you've ever been in a really toxic relationship, you know you don't want to get into that. You don't want to repeat that. This is the moment in the movie where I go out and get a really bad haircut, which I have done, by the way. And so I was thinking to myself, okay, I have to have a relationship with money. Who could I want so much? Who would be so wonderful and safe and aligned with my values and all that? Who could I want so much that I'd be willing to have this person in my life, even if it's money? And because I started out with so much pain, and the money monster, the first money persona, was so real to me. Like, it felt like a person was in the room with me. And then when it was gone, it was so gone because of all that. When I asked myself, who could I want so much that I'd want this person, even though it was money, the opposite easily popped into my mind's eye. And I have to pause for a second and say, I'm terrible at visualization. This was a rare event. If you ask me to imagine sitting by the bank of a river, which is a very common meditation trope, I will spend 45 minutes going through a mental slideshow of every river I have ever seen. And I'll make myself crazy that way. So I'm saying this because there are tricks for those of you who are like me and not easy visualizers in that way, because we're so wrapped up in our conscious mind and controlling everything. I usually start with other senses to ease into that. And if you don't see either one of them, it's not the end of the world. We're just lighting up your neurology, getting you to feel things, and then giving that form and boundaries so that we can make changes. That's the psychological science theory behind it. So anyway, that I found out years after I'd been doing this for thousands of people. So I asked myself this question, and who could I want so much, even though he's money? And this tall, dark, handsome, romantic, clean-cut, super safe sweetie shows up in my mind. Hair kind of slicked back, wearing a tuxedo, holding a bouquet of red flowers. Handsome. And in love with me, and wanted to woo me. And this was so weird to me. Like, money wanting to woo me was so unfamiliar to me. And it was also wonderful because there was so much love. It was like this guy was the personification of love, and I felt like he had been there for a really, really long time, and I'd never seen him because the bad boy biker was in the way. And it's as if my hanging out with the biker was breaking this sweetheart relationship with money, his heart. He was that vulnerable, which, by the way, think of that. Having a relationship with money who not only loves you and wants to be with you, but you have the power to break this person's heart. So it's not like we're inventing some imaginary Santa Claus who's going to come along and have all the power in the relationship. I, for the first time in my life, had this experience that, oh my God, I am the gatekeeper. I have the body. I'm the one who has the power in the relationship, and I never knew. So there's this super cute, sweet guy who loves me, who wants to be with me, and I realized I had no idea how to allow money to be with me on the scale that money wanted to be with me in that moment, because I had Olympic athlete muscles of money repulsion. If there had been an Olympic sport, I would have taken them all the golds. So I asked, and that's kind of the really cool thing about giving personhood, giving emotions to this real relationship, but when it's disembodied, when it's a measure of value, when it's energy, when it's a field, all of which very easily a case can be made for all of that being true. But it doesn't feel real until it feels like a person. So I asked him, and my first conversation with money was something like, money, what do you need from me to allow you to be with me the way you want to be with me. So I want you to hear those presuppositions. Money wants to be with me, and it's up to me because I have the power to push it away or allow money to be with me. And that if I ask a question, money can respond. So I ask the question, and as the human mind works, you ask a question, you get an answer. And I'm getting this answer from this entity of love who doesn't have any of my insecurities around money, which is very useful. And in that moment, he said to me, I need you to love me and stop treating me like a monster. And that felt so fair. Like if I was on Reddit asking if I was the asshole, I was the asshole in this relationship. And I wanted to be a good partner. And quickly, I always feel like I have to address the love of money is the root of all evil thing. So first of all, love, real love is never evil. Love does not exploit. Love does not harm. Love is not scarce. Love is not jealous. Love is not competitive. Love does not inflict pain. Love is instead, love is generous and noble. I would even say our most divine expression of being. So that's the kind of love that I'm talking about. Lucky for me, I have a friend in the UK who took a class on ancient Aramaic and reported back to me that the original translation, the original language of the Torah, the Old Testament, does not say that the love of money is the root of all evil. It actually says worshiping money will cause you problems. And I would say, yeah, of course. So you get to be a loving person and you get to grow your wealth in proportion to how loving you are. And when you have money and love on opposite teams fighting against each other, there is no way to win. There's no way to win. So we need to put love and money on the same team with a relationship with money that shares your values, wants to save the world with you so that you don't always need to have the brakes on. Moving on. So money said to me, I need you to love me and I need you to stop treating me like a monster. That seemed fair. And I had this instant insight to all the times people would ask me how I worked, which was a euphemism for what do you charge? It only took me 10 years to figure that out. And I would have an understandable reaction to that question, which would look sort of emotionally like, I would choke. I would get so embarrassed and apologetic and conflicted because I like to help people. I don't want to hurt people. I was afraid if I accepted payment, I was causing harm and all that. And that was so unkind and unhealthy. And no wonder I was pushing money away from people who really wanted to hire me and really would benefit from me. So I made an agreement with my money honey on that day that next time he brought me a gift, I would say thank you. And that looks like somebody asked me what I charge, and I say, this is what I charge, with kind of the energy of, isn't he beautiful? And then I can shut up and allow another person to be an adult and make their decision. And I don't have to overcome objections. People know what is right for them and what they want. And I can tell them and they can decide. Yay. So breaking that down into punchline. I forgot the punchline. So in the next few days, 4 people hired me for double what I'd ever charged before. And they kept coming and they kept coming. And at one point, 2007, I had 300 clients. And I just swore that's never happening again. Simply because when you have that many, you can't know and love each one as much as you can when you have a smaller amount. So my rates just kept going up and I started having waiting lists and I started doing retreats and group programs. I wrote my book and I learned this, by the way, from my actor days, like 40 years ago. And Financial Alchemy, 12 Months of Magic and Manifestation. And I've made millions of dollars since. But it all started by making a commitment to not being a dick, to a very sweet relationship with money, who wants to help people, wants me to be in integrity, wants to save the world, and wants to be with me. The way to get there is through the monster. And I know this because I had a client many, many years ago who wanted to try skipping that. And I was like, okay, let's see what happens. And I'll tell you what happens. Nothing happens. It's very, very hard to get a clear signal and feel connected to your money honey while you are in bed with your money monster. It's like stepping out with your human. And yeah, I know polyamory is kind of big with the kids these days, but my parents did that. I saw the chaos and I just thought, too much work. So I would say that with money too. Don't cheat on your money honey. Accept clients who value you and negotiate what you charge with this money who loves you and shares your values. And I'm jumping way ahead of myself because I do that. And
It's all right.
Can I just walk quickly through the 6 steps of the process so people at home can try applying it themselves?
Yeah, for sure.
And also checking in because I've been talking so quickly. I'm not sure if you had a question and I just talked right over you.
No, that's good. It sounds like we're going to go through the framework of what you teach. Then we'll kind of circle around to the speed, because I know some people are maybe listening right now is like, oh, okay, I've heard some things that are instant results. And then I wonder if that's even possible for me, which is also tied all up in how long they've been dating their money monster. Yeah. So yeah, let's do it. Let's jump in.
Before we jump in, I do have a theory about these fast and big results. And honestly, and I tell this to every person who hires me, I have no idea what will happen, when, how much. I am as shocked as the next person. And I get emails on a daily basis from people having breakthroughs, including people who I've never heard of. One of my favorite clients, Pam, had her first $250,000 month just using my book before she ever hired me. And then I coached her over a year and she bought the company she was making those sales for. So I don't know. What I do know is the experience of slaying your monster and having this new relationship with life that I call money, because money needs my love and healing. And I would suggest money needs everybody's love and healing to have a better, more sustainable experience on this planet. When you change your experience of life and your relationship with life and yourself, that is life-changing. I'm not even finding really good words to express it right now. And what happens, in my experience with clients, is they are so elevated and excited by this new experience of being a human being and how the world responds to them and how they're experiencing their life, that they often don't tell me about the money result, or it comes in in the last 30 seconds of the coaching session. I had a client who made over $1 million in 6 weeks and didn't tell me. I found out from another client who was friends with him, and this was back in 2007. So it's kind of like dessert, but it's a really good dessert. And it's good for my marketing.
Yeah, right.
So I do have a theory about why results tend to happen really big and fast, like I explained in my own life with the money and the love. And I don't remember if I mentioned Leslie from Idaho selling her house for $1.2 million, a couple hours after our coaching call. And it had been on the market for years and nobody had looked at it in over a year. And just a lot of this kind of stuff happening. I believe that when you've been putting forth the effort, taking the actions, reading the books, taking the classes, working with the coach, whatever it is that you were doing to get the result that you desire with money, love, healing, whatever, and you aren't getting the result, it's almost like all this energy is building up behind this protective wall. Because change happens at the speed of safety. And if change isn't happening, something is not safe about what you want. And consciously doesn't make sense. Who consciously protects themselves from money? But we do protect ourselves from the pain of rejection and fear and not good enough and all those deeper things that money represents. And love, all of our heartbreak. You have to do some digging, and that's step 1, and I'll get to that in a moment. When you finally make it safe, all this energy that's been building up can suddenly find expression. Seeds that you planted years ago and forgot about suddenly come to fruition. So it's mysterious to me. I just have a lot of experience with these results, so it's become normal to me. And here's how to do it. And I broke it down into 6 steps because honestly, after I had my change and I had all these clients coming in, I noticed that most of them also had money issues because they're human and money is the number one excuse we give for what we can't have, do, or be. And then I started getting clients with vast amounts of money. And that was getting in the way of stuff. Like the client who inherited $22 million and suddenly all of her relationships turned to crap. And her live-in boyfriend left her and married somebody else, and all her friends were borrowing money and then turning on her so that they could feel good about not paying her back. This was how her monster showed up, or people who make money and get rid of it. So it can look lots of different ways. So where we all start, whether you are on public assistance or a billionaire, because I've coached the gamut, we start with step number 1, which is uncover the root cause. And you've heard me touch on this a gazillion times already. The root cause of your money monster is not really money. It's what money represents. Anything that ever made you feel unlovable, not worthy or valued, not safe, especially if it doesn't look like it has to do with money. So anything with your parents that they didn't make you feel loved and valued and safe, because parents are our original relationship with money. If that has any emotional energy, dig that up. Anything that made you feel the world wasn't safe. And it could be illness or accident or violence or wars going on around you or just whatever it is, whatever your thing is. Just throw that in there. And then step number 1, you are like building a case against the universe with what is wrong in your life and in the world. And the goal of building this case is to feel it. This is how we rewire your brain, because money will always be a trigger. And it will either be a trigger of fear or it will be a trigger of love. So this is where we're digging up all of the reasons we push money away that we aren't aware of. And so any wounds that you were not loved, not good enough, not safe, helpless, pull up enough of those. You do not need to re-traumatize yourself. You also do not need to dissociate. You went too far. You don't need to get all of it. You don't need to get all of it. You just need to get enough. And when you have what I call a critical mass of ick, you give this pain and all these things that are wrong, you give it personhood. You blame it on somebody who is not you and not your parents because of step number 3. I am telling you, take off your law of attraction, positive thinking, well-adjusted cap and bury it 30 feet below the ground in a lead box. You'll have it back later. And so I'm telling you to step 1, be a victim. Step 2, blame. Blame it all on an external entity. For those of you who don't usually visualize, I like to say, how big is it? Have a monster worth destroying. So how big is the pain? Does it feel hot or cold? Does it feel male or female? Does it have a smell? What does its fingernails look like? Its teeth, its eyeballs, its hair. And we're just kind of fleshing out this imaginary all evil monster that makes life worth not living. And then we come to step number 3. And my mother, who used to watch Highlander, all I remember from that is there can only be one. And that comes to play here. This monster, its purpose is ultimately to kill you, but to get you there by torturing you, going after your kids and going after what you care about and making you give up hope. That's what the monster is. And only one of you gets to survive this process. So I highly encourage you to choose yourself and annihilate this imaginary but real, because to your subconscious, where all of your attitudes, beliefs, results, and actions come from, it is real. Destroy it by any means necessary. You have the arsenal of your imagination. So you can use a lightsaber or a machete or an atom bomb or a volcano. I had a client who ran over her monster with a monster truck. And the goal is just make it completely gone. And when it's gone, you will know it because it'll have that emptiness and it may feel light, it may feel scary. It just needs to feel different. And how it is will be just, it'll be your way. And that's the perfect way. And when it's gone, that's step number 3. Now we go to the fun part. There is a fun part. And that is you meet your money honey. And that's step 4. The rules of your money honey is your money honey is love. When you have annihilated the monster, all that remains is love. So this is a personification and embodiment of love. And we're going to call it money if the issue that brought you to this process is money, or you can call it something else. And it's not going to be God, and it's not going to be Oprah or anybody way up here while you're way down there, because that becomes another monster. We don't want any new relationship that disempowers you or infantilizes you. It's going to be a partnership. I like romantic money honeys because that is an equal partnership where you do have the power to break your money honey's heart, where this is your partner who sees the best in you and believes in you. And knowing how many of us have had sexual trauma and maybe relationship isn't safe, it doesn't have to be romantic. It just needs to be somebody that you would want in your life so much you'd be willing to have a relationship with this person, even though it's money. And this person loves you more than anybody in the world and chooses you because this is your relationship. And this person is safe. And you want to have a relationship with this person, this imaginary person, who may be based on somebody real, hopefully not somebody in your immediate life, or maybe somebody completely imaginary. It's kind of fun to see what shows up. I had a client who, her first idea of a money honey was Jesus, to which I asked, is it a sexy Jesus? And the Jesus thing didn't work. It ended up Antonio Banderas, which was a lot easier.
Yeah, I bet.
For Meet Your Money Honey, honestly, if you were to hear me talk about this 15, 20 years ago, back in the olden days, I would say things like create your money honey. And I don't think that's as useful because it really feels as it's arising out of your subconscious, like this new relationship is his own or her own or their own, whatever your flavor. It's its own person. And it may feel like he, she, they have been there a long time loving you, but it just feels like their own independent person. Instead of, oh my God, so is it John Travolta or Denzel Washington or Jennifer Aniston or Angelina Jolie? I mean, you can just let your money honey decide who they want to be. I got a letter from a woman who, her money honey was John Travolta dressed up like Saturday Night Fever, and she thought, that is ridiculous. And so she tried to imagine her money honey in other clothes, but he kept popping back into her mind in the white suit. This is a really cool story.
It's hard to get that out of your head when, yeah.
So, and it felt like he was a real person and he had a sense of humor. And she got in her car, turned on the radio, and the Bee Gees were playing. And a little background is her money was so tight, so many clients owed her money and weren't paying that she didn't think she was going to make payroll that month. And her money honey, John Travolta, Saturday Night Fever, money honey, told her to go to the bank and transfer money from one account to another. Now, honestly, I don't know why, because that wasn't going to solve the problem. It wasn't adding more money, but he was really clear that's what he wanted her to do. So she went to the bank, she transferred money from one account to another, got the deposit slip, headed over to the coffee establishment that we all know about, got in line, is buying coffee for the whole office, and gets a message on her phone. You know, she's scrolling on her phone like we all do every time we stand in line. And she gets an email from a client who was invoiced that morning and is paying that day. And it's a big 5-figure amount that will pay off the payroll and the debts. And she looked at the timestamp between the bank deposit and the email, and it was 2 minutes. So I know what you're thinking. Why did it take so long? Why wasn't it instantaneous? You know, we're just tightening up the process. And that story is on my blog. So she tells it better than I do. Anyway, so meet your money honey, have a conversation, have a dialogue with your money honey, and you can totally steal my first conversation. What do you need from me to allow you to be with me the way you want to be with me? And I found a video years and years ago by somebody who likes my work and was shot a video, and she got it totally wrong. And I'm not going to out her or criticize her, but I will say what she got wrong was she thought you need to do something to make money love you. So I want to make a very, very clear distinction that love, especially your money honey's love, is unconditional. You do not have to earn that. Your existence earns that. You being you earns that. But presence is conditional. And if you push money away, money will get the message. If you reject yourself and undervalue yourself, you will break your money honey's heart. and you will start to see effects to get your attention to get into better relationship with yourself, better relationship with life, better relationship with money. That's a very kind of, I think, Buddhist Hindu frame of when bad things happen to good people. But I was, I got my degree in religion, so that's what I do. And I have a statue of Shiva in my kitchen where he's dancing on one foot and he's got all the arms around and a big flame halo. And underneath his foot, it took years before I noticed that underneath his foot is a little person, which is pretty much the universe is dancing on our back to get us to let go of everything that causes our suffering. Let go of the ignorance and the scarcity and the self-punishment and all of the ignorance is the best catch-all for Buddhism and Hinduism, to let go of the temporary things that cause our suffering so that we can actually evolve into joy, because that is the definition and the nature of moksha, and nirvana is just bliss. So when money goes down, I see that as a loving invitation from the universe, which gets our attention through money, love, and health primarily, to invite us to evolve and become more powerful and more tapped in to our worth and our lovability and our creative power in life that we forget, because that is what being human is. So have that conversation with money. And by the way, you can do this process. I'm kind of jumping ahead again because I do that. But one of my favorite clients, a woman named Athena, who I coached about 20 years ago, went from being a psychic by the hour, super duper talented, and not making enough money, single mother, mountains of debt. And she did the process on her own. And her money honey told her to hire me. And she came to me, we had the conversation. I'm hearing about her circumstances. I'm screaming inside, oh my God, I'm seeing the abyss. She can't possibly afford me. And then I heard a voice also in my head that said, shut up, she's an adult. Let her decide. Treat her with some respect. And she did hire me. And within a couple of months, she was making tens of thousands of dollars and charging in packages instead of by the hour. Her mortgage company called her up, paid off her credit card debt, and set up lower mortgage payments for her without her even asking. And then she was going on money moons to Miami, money honeymoons, spiritual money moons with her money honey. And I asked her what was behind such a rapid big shift. And she said to me that I had coached her through the process twice to slay a money monster, have a new money honey, but she had taken herself through the process another 17 times.
Whoa.
This is not necessary. I don't do it that often.
Yeah.
But I'm sharing that because I see this sort of as a kind of a spiritual hygiene practice where we are just doing great in life and then boom, something happens and throws us off our game. And there's maybe a tragedy or an illness or just something changes. And we're not feeling safe with the world again. And that is an opportunity to up-level and come into a newer, deeper relationship with life, a new monster, a new honey. You never have the original monster again. But when you up-level, you may find new things that make the world feel unsafe, a pandemic, a war, whatever, and you can use it again. So step 4 is meet your money honey. 5, have that conversation with your money honey. 6, take concrete, measurable action, because in my experience, when I invite a client to ask their money honey what your money honey needs from you to allow him, her, they to be with you, the answers typically come back very aspirational, like, I want you to love yourself. I want you to trust. And the worst of all, I want you to relax. And you can imagine how that goes over with women.
Right. It never goes over ever in any situation.
Yeah.
Just calm down is not something you say.
Yeah. Good advice.
Yeah.
Great direction to move in. And I don't believe any human being in the history of human beings has ever successfully loved themselves 24/7 as well as they can for all their lives. So it's a great goal. And I want you to have a win, and I want you to bring it down to earth and bring it into matter. So this is why step 6, concrete measurable action, just one thing that you're going to do really soon to demonstrate to yourself that this relationship has changed, that you are committed to this new relationship. And I would just say whatever bubbles up in your mind first, and run it by your partner here, your money honey. And very often it's not what you would expect. So sometimes it's balance your checkbook, contact the people who owe you money, do your taxes, something like that. Sometimes. More often, it doesn't look like that at all. And it's something like go dancing. Or I mentioned the guy from, I think maybe it was 2007 or somewhere in the 20 years ago realm, who made over $1 million in 6 weeks and didn't tell me. But I do remember his coaching session. And his new relationship with money was this elegant French woman. And she said, I want you to use money for things that are worthwhile. So don't waste me on crap. But what she wanted him to do, what they agreed on, was he was going to take his child with him to Paris. And that was the action before the money showed up. My client, Katie, her agreement with her money honey was she would go skating in the middle of December in Toronto, where I hear it's cold. I wouldn't know because I live in LA. And she went skating with her child also. Like, if you have children, by the way, that's a super high motivation to get rid of the monster, because the monster, you don't want to pass that on to your kid. So she went skating with her child and went home and got a phone call giving her $10,000 that she didn't even ask for. And that was the beginning of her journey, because it doesn't end there. It just begins, and you want to stay in relationship. Journaling is very helpful. And it wasn't about, again, what do I need to do to make you love me? It's just, what do I need to do to allow you to be with me?
Yeah, that's a pretty simple question to ask, and then see what comes from that. See where the conversation goes.
Another one that I like that I just sent to someone this week, because it's a favorite one of mine. So let's say you have a money honey and then things are going sideways and it doesn't make sense and you're stuck and you're struggling. Here is my favorite question. Honestly, based on my own experience, when I got stuck, I don't know how many years ago, but what do I need to learn here to allow me to let go of this struggle? And again, I want to make clear, everything that we're talking about is not to hand over your power to some imaginary money fairy, because the synchronicities and the success stories may make it look like that, but really it's all about connecting you to your power and your worth, and your results shift from that. And when you're feeling stuck, because I also don't want anybody beating themselves up because Morgana told this story about Leslie or Perry or Kate or somebody else, and it didn't happen for me like that. First, make sure that the monster is deep enough and gone enough. Make sure that this relationship with the honey feels really real and human, and then bring your concerns to this partner. I have to apologize for just cramming in so much and talking so quickly. Yes, I have my book. I have my coaching. I have so many resources on my website at morganarae.com. Just add a .com to my name to go back and go slower and look up your questions and all that kind of stuff. But I really am so passionate about alleviating suffering and inequity and empowering people that I just really am trying to cram everything that I can into the little bit of time that we have left. So if you feel like a French goose, it is totally my fault. I apologize for that. And also, don't expect anybody to master this in an hour. And if you retain 2 or 3% of what I've shared, yay. And be gentle with yourself and give yourself an opportunity to go slower and go deeper later. But I am trying to pack in a lot.
Yeah, I'd love to touch on that bit, because as you were talking, I kind of connected a dot from something you said earlier. So for some of my folks who are listening who may be a little more technical left brain and listening to us talking about, I'm going to have a conversation with a fictitious partner that I'm labeling as money, and I'm going to ask it questions, and what the hell am I right now? And if you're thinking that, maybe think about this, because you also mentioned journaling, which I do a lot. I've had a lot of benefit with that. But even before that, you mentioned subconscious. And I found in my personal experience, if you bring something up out in the conscious world, like say you journal about it, let's say you ask a question, what could I do to be a better partner to my money? And you write that down. And if you don't get an immediate answer, that's okay. But you'll be in the shower, you'll be driving down the road, or you'll be somewhere where out of the blue, something comes across your consciousness and you're like, whoa, where'd that come from? And then you think about, oh yeah, that's right. Okay, that could be the thing that I asked earlier this morning or over coffee. Then when you start chewing on a little bit more, that's how the subconscious works. Sometimes it serves things up, not exactly when you're expecting it or looking for it. Would you say that's common in your experience?
Oh my God, yes. The subconscious is solving problems. It kind of looks at the conscious mind as the big brother or sister that it wants to please. And the conscious mind can be very rigid and suspicious of strangers, strange ideas coming in. So the subconscious is going to be working on it. And in journaling, I even prefer to, instead of how can I be a better relationship partner to money, I would write, hey, money honey, MH, whatever you want to do. How can I be a better partner to you? And have the dialogue that way, and then write your money honey's response. But when you've got big problems and they're stuck, I find that the distraction of driving or showering, the conscious mind is busy doing this thing, and that's when the subconscious mind can bring it up. Because honestly, when you're driving, you're in a trance. You're seriously in a hypnotic trance. So the border between the conscious and the subconscious mind becomes more porous during those exact activities when you are not paying attention to the problem. And that's when the new idea can scale the barricades and sneak in. And then your conscious mind gets to take a look at it and decide what to do with it.
That's really cool. And you mentioned it a minute ago, but I'm on your website now. I'll have it in the show notes, morganarae.com. And I'm curious, when it comes to your book, Financial Alchemy, what would you say is the one piece when people read it and you get those emails from folks and they're like, oh my gosh, this was the breakthrough in the book. It's on page, whatever. What is the one thing that you hear just over and over again from people who've read it?
This is my favorite, is people write to me about their money honey, and they write about their money honey in such vivid detail. I have one that sounds like a romance novel, what she wrote about her, and the name and what he says. And I get these, and there are a lot of them on, not all of them by a long shot because I get lazy, but there are a lot of them on my website under success stories because I love what other people say. I get tired of hearing myself. I wrote the book that I wanted because it's more of a self-coaching system than a book. Because you can't see how many books that I have in my house, but I am such a hoarder. And you read a book and it changes your life, and then you forget about it or you stop putting it into practice. So I created my own system, what I call a manifestation system, but it's also strategic planning with maybe a little bit of pixie dust.
Okay.
And what I found worked for me to go from being really, really frustrated to overachieving my big results. And back in 2007, short story, I found out a couple of my friends were getting booths and speaking at the Conscious Life Expo at LAX, the LA airport, one of the hotels there. And I never heard of it. But as soon as I heard that two of my friends were speaking there and had booths, I was like, but I want to speak at the Conscious Life Expo. And a couple hours later, I got a phone call offering me a free booth at the front door and a speaking gig at the Conscious Life Expo. I am the world's best manifester by whining. I've done that quite a bit. And I'm just whining to the universe, but I want this. And then it happens. So great. I've got the speaking gig at the Conscious Life Expo, and all I have to sell is coaching, which is sort of like proposing marriage on a first date. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I felt like I need something a little bit between date and marriage. And I had been toying with the idea for a couple of years of creating a book about financial alchemy and including my own personal system of manifestation and setting goals and making them happen as if by magic. So that was the first iteration. It was 2006, not 7, 2006. I was being interviewed on PBS and all sorts of stuff for this expo, and I'm selling a book. My publisher at the time was Office Max. Perhaps you've heard of them. And that's how it began. Yeah. And then in 2012, I accidentally found myself with the world's top agent for nonfiction personal development books, who represents Marie Kondo and Eckhart Tolle, and he wanted me to write a book proposal. And I was like, oh, book proposal, that sounds terrifying. I think I will just sneakily, surreptitiously actually publish my book for real through Ingram and become a best-selling author so that nobody will notice that I'm not writing my book proposal. And that's how that happened.
I understand all of that. Yeah, that's hysterical. Oh, wow. Morgana, thank you so much for this conversation. This was so much fun. And I think it was packed with a lot of things people could go, all right, how can I see myself doing that? And then real actionable stuff. But also, you've got a book if they need some reminders. I mean, we've only been at this for an hour, and I spent 10 minutes of it talking about a crazy wedding story. So
beautiful wedding story.
It was a lot to take in an hour. And if you're still with us, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you think is super important to cover before we head out? Or any little word of wisdom that you love to part with?
Yes. I know that in my personal development field and the coaching world and in general, there's a lot of blame. And by the way, it didn't begin now. If you read the book of Job, all of his comforters are saying, hey, Job, you must have done something terrible for all this awful stuff to happen to you. So there is a lot of shame and fear around victim experiences, like don't be a victim or you're being such a victim. And I don't find that helpful or useful. I actually believe that we all have victim experiences. It's built into the design. And that's why we have religions. It's because human beings, we have heartache and loss and really deep experiences of pain. And though I want to say that your victim experiences are sacred and they are sources of power because they motivate us to evolve, and they also humanize us. They give us the capacity to respect the experiences of other human beings. And I think without that, we would be monsters. So instead of judging your hurt, I invite you to use your hurt to build a monster worth destroying so that on the other side, you can have a new relationship with life that sticks.
Nice. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that. That's a great way to end things today.
My pleasure.
Before you go, I've got something for you. If today's episode sparked a little rebellion in you and you're feeling ready to make a shift, grab my free guide, Plotting Your Joyful Rebellion. It's a 5-step roadmap to help you stop performing the life you were told to want and start building the one that actually fits. Head over to ajoyfulrebellion.com to download it, and I'll meet you there. Oh, and see you next week.